They rejected the infertile Apache girl, but the rancher said, "I only want you." She was born on a quiet morning when the desert sky was still soft and pink. Her mother said the wind was gentle that day, as if the land itself was trying to welcome her kindly. She was given a simple name, one that carried the history of her Apache people, a name that meant endurance. From the beginning, her life was ordinary in the eyes of others, but inside her heart, it was always heavy. She grew up in a small community where everyone knew everyone else. Children ran barefoot on dusty paths, elders sat together sharing stories of the past, and traditions were followed without question. From a young age, she learned what was expected of her. Girls were taught to be patient, respectful, and strong. They were told that one day they would become wives and mothers, and that this was the greatest honor a woman could have. She listened carefully, nodded obediently, and tried to imagine that future for herself. As a child, she was quiet but kind. She helped her mother cook, fetched water, and took care of younger cousins. She was not the loudest girl, nor the most beautiful by local standards, but people often said she had a gentle nature. Teachers praised her for working hard. Elders said she would make a good wife someday. Those words stayed with her, becoming a promise she held close to her heart. When she became a young woman, life slowly began to change. Her friends started getting attention from young men. There were shy smiles, small gifts, and families visiting each other to talk about possible marriages. She watched all of this from the side, happy for them but secretly waiting for her turn. She believed it would come. She believed patience would be rewarded. But time passed and things did not unfold the way she hoped. She began to feel unwell often. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just tiredness from work. But the pain became harder to hide. Eventually, her family took her to a clinic far away from the community. The visit was supposed to be routine, something simple. She sat on a cold chair, hands folded tightly in her lap, while the doctor spoke in a calm voice. The words she heard that day changed everything. The doctor explained carefully, using gentle language, but the meaning was clear. She would not be able to have children. The reason did not matter to her. All she could hear was the sentence repeating in her mind again and again. She felt as if the room had grown smaller, the air heavier. She nodded politely, thanked the doctor, and walked out as if nothing had happened. On the drive home, she stared out the window. The land looked the same, but she felt different. Something inside her had broken quietly. At first, only her parents knew. They tried to comfort her, telling her that life was more than one role, that she was still their daughter, still valuable. She wanted to believe them. But even they looked worried, not because they didn't love her, but because they knew how the community thought. News spreads fast in small places, even when no one speaks openly. Within weeks, people started treating her differently. It was subtle at first. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Some women looked at her with pity, others with judgment. Elders spoke to her more gently, as if she were fragile. That kindness hurt more than cruelty. Marriage talks that once included her name slowly disappeared. Families stopped visiting. Young men who once greeted her warmly now avoided her eyes. She became someone people felt sorry for, not someone they dreamed about. She tried to keep her routine the same. She worked, helped her family, attended gatherings. But inside, she felt like she was fading. Each celebration reminded her of what she might never have. Each birth announcement felt like a quiet reminder of her own loss. There was one man she had secretly hoped might choose her. They had grown up together, shared laughter, and once talked about the future in careful, hopeful words. But one evening, she heard he was engaged to someone else. The reason was never said aloud, but she knew. Everyone knew. Tradition demanded certain things, and she no longer fit the picture. She did not cry in front of anyone. Her pain was private. At night, when the house was quiet, she would lie awake staring at the ceiling, asking herself questions that had no answers. Was she less of a woman? Had she done something wrong? Why did her worth feel so tied to something she could not control? The hardest part was not the loss of motherhood, it was the loss of belonging. She began to feel like a guest in her own home, a reminder of something uncomfortable. People were not cruel, but they were distant, and distance can wound deeply. One day, an elder woman spoke to her kindly but firmly. She suggested that the girl accept her fate, stop hoping for marriage, and dedicate herself to helping others. The words were meant as advice, but they felt like a door closing forever. She smiled politely and thanked the woman, but inside, her heart sank. That night, she made a quiet decision. She could not stay where every path led to disappointment. She did not want to live her life being pitied or defined by what she lacked. She wanted to feel useful, respected, and alive again. Even if love was no longer promised, dignity still mattered. She heard about work on a distant ranch through a family friend. It was far from her community, surrounded by open land and hard labor. The pay was modest, the work demanding. Most people didn't want the job. For her, it sounded like freedom. When she told her parents, they were surprised but understanding. They saw the tiredness in her eyes, the quiet sadness she carried. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering prayers for her safety. Her father nodded, proud of her courage even though his heart ached. The morning she left, she packed lightly. A few clothes, a small bag, and memories she couldn't leave behind. As she stepped away from the place she had always known, she felt fear, but also relief. For the first time in a long while, the future was unknown, and that felt better than a future already decided by others. She did not leave with dreams of love or happiness. She left simply to breathe. As the road stretched ahead, she promised herself one thing: she would not let rejection define her entire life. Even if the world refused to choose her, she would choose herself. And though she didn't know it yet, this quiet choice was the beginning of everything changing. The journey away from her community was longer than she expected. The bus moved slowly, stopping at small towns and quiet roads. She watched the land change outside the window. The familiar desert slowly turned into wide open fields and distant hills. With every mile, she felt something heavy lifting from her chest, but fear traveled with her. She was leaving behind everything she knew. Even if that place had hurt her, it was still home. When she finally arrived at the ranch area, the air felt different. It was cooler, cleaner, and filled with the smell of grass and animals. The land seemed endless, stretching far beyond where the eye could see. She stood there for a moment with her small bag in her hand, feeling both small and strangely hopeful. The ranch manager showed her a small room where she would stay. It was simple, just a bed, a table, and a window that looked out onto the fields. There were no decorations, no memories tied to it. For the first time, she was somewhere no one knew her story. No one knew what she lacked. That thought brought her quiet comfort. The work started early the next morning. The sun had barely risen when she stepped outside. Her tasks were not easy. She cleaned, helped prepare food, carried supplies, and sometimes assisted with animals. Her hands grew rough, her muscles sore. At night, she collapsed onto her bed, too tired to think. The hard work became a kind of medicine. It left little space for painful thoughts. The people at the ranch were polite but distant. They judged her by how well she worked, not by her past. No one asked personal questions. No one whispered behind her back. She was just another worker, and that felt like relief. Still, loneliness followed her like a quiet companion. In the evenings, she often sat by the window, watching the sky turn orange and purple. She thought of her family, her childhood, and the life she had left behind. Some nights, tears came without warning. Other nights, she felt strangely peaceful. She was learning how to live with silence. As weeks passed, she realized how deeply rejection had shaped her. Even here, where no one knew her secret, she held herself back. She avoided closeness. She expected disappointment before it arrived. When people were kind, she wondered how long it would last. Letters from home arrived sometimes. Her mother wrote about daily life, about neighbors, about births and celebrations. She read every word carefully, smiling at familiar names but feeling the old ache return. She replied with short letters, saying she was fine, that work was good. She never wrote about the emptiness she still carried. One afternoon, while resting after a long day, she overheard two workers talking. They spoke casually about marriage, about children, about future plans. Their words were not meant to hurt, but they did. She felt that familiar tightening in her chest. Even far from home, the same world existed. The same expectations followed women everywhere. That night she couldn't sleep. Memories flooded her mind, faces that turned away, gentle words that felt like rejection, doors quietly closing. She wondered if running away had really changed anything, or if she was just hiding from pain that would always find her. A few days later, she was asked to help in town with supplies. The town was small, but busy compared to the ranch. People walked quickly, living lives full of purpose. She blended into the crowd easily, unnoticed and anonymous. That anonymity felt safe. While waiting outside a store, she saw a couple arguing softly. The woman looked tired, the man frustrated. A child stood between them, holding both their hands. The sight stirred something inside her, not jealousy, but sadness mixed with longing. She realized she wasn't just mourning children she would never have. She was mourning a life she had imagined for herself. Back at the ranch, she worked even harder. She volunteered for extra tasks, hoping exhaustion would silence her thoughts. People noticed her dedication. Some respected her for it. Others simply accepted it. But still, no one truly saw her. One evening, an older worker offered her tea. They sat quietly, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. The woman spoke about her own life, missed chances, regrets, and lessons learned too late. She didn't ask about her past. She simply said, "Life doesn't always follow the path we expect, but that doesn't mean it's empty." Those words stayed with her. Slowly, she began to understand something important. The rejection she faced back home was not just about children. It was about fear, fear of difference, fear of breaking tradition. And she had carried that fear with her, letting it define her value. She started to stand a little straighter. She looked people in the eyes when she spoke. She allowed herself small joys, warm sunlight, shared laughter, quiet mornings. She reminded herself that she was still whole, still capable of giving and receiving care. Yet doubt never fully left. Some nights she wondered if she was pretending to be strong while still broken inside. She wondered if she would ever feel truly chosen, not tolerated or pitied. One day, the ranch owner was expected to return after a long absence. People spoke about him with mixed feelings. Some said he was strict, others said fair but distant. She listened quietly, uninterested. Authority figures had never brought comfort to her life. When the day came, she noticed a change in the atmosphere. Workers moved faster, more carefully. She stayed focused on her tasks, keeping her head down. She didn't want attention. Attention often came with judgment, but fate has a way of shifting things when one least expects it. As she carried supplies across the yard, she felt someone watching her. She looked up briefly and saw a man standing at a distance. His face showed no emotion, just quiet observation. She quickly looked away, her heart beating faster for reasons she didn't understand. She told herself it meant nothing. That evening, as she lay in bed, she felt a strange mix of unease and curiosity. She pushed it aside, reminding herself of her rule: expect nothing, hope for little. Hope had hurt her before. Still, something had changed, though she couldn't name it yet. The road she had taken away from rejection was slowly leading her somewhere unexpected. And even though she was still carrying wounds, she was no longer standing still. She didn't know it then, but the life she thought was over was quietly preparing to begin again. One choice, one moment, one unexpected meeting at a time. The next morning began like all the others. with the soft sound of wind moving through the grass and the distant calls of animals waking up. She rose before the sun, tied her hair back, and stepped outside. The land was calm, painted in pale gold light. For a moment she forgot the man she had seen the day before. Work had a way of clearing her mind, but she was wrong to think the moment had passed. Later that day, she was asked to bring fresh water to the far end of the fields. It was a longer walk than usual. As she approached the old fence, she noticed the same man standing near the horses. Up close, he looked older than she had expected. His face was marked by years of sun and effort, his posture firm but not rigid. He wasn't watching her in a way that felt uncomfortable. It was more like quiet attention, as if he was trying to understand the land and the people on it at the same time. He greeted her simply, calling her by her name. That surprised her. Most people at the ranch barely remembered names. She nodded politely and replied. The conversation was short, just questions about the work and whether she needed help. There was no curiosity about her past, no hidden meaning in his tone. And yet, something about the exchange stayed with her long after it ended. Over the next few days, she noticed him more often, not because he followed her, but because he was present. He worked alongside the others when needed, spoke little, and listened more than he talked. When he gave instructions, they were clear and fair. There was no harshness, no unnecessary authority. She found herself respecting him without realizing when it happened. One afternoon, she made a small mistake while organizing supplies. She expected sharp words or disappointment. Instead, he calmly showed her a better way to do it. There was no judgment in his voice. That simple moment stirred something deep inside her. She had grown used to being measured, compared, and quietly found lacking. Here, she was simply learning. As weeks passed, their interactions became more frequent but never forced. Sometimes they spoke while working. Other times they shared silence. She realized she felt comfortable around him, which frightened her. Comfort often led to trust, and trust had been broken before. He noticed her dedication. When others rested, she continued. When tasks were difficult, she didn't complain. He didn't praise her loudly, but occasionally he nodded in approval. Those small gestures meant more to her than grand words ever could. One evening, as the sky darkened and the air cooled, he asked her to sit for a moment. They sat on a wooden bench near the edge of the land. The horses moved quietly nearby. He spoke about the ranch, about how hard it was to keep things running after loss. He mentioned his wife who had passed years ago. He did not speak with bitterness, only honesty. She listened carefully, feeling a connection she hadn't expected. She shared little about herself, just that she came from far away and wanted to work. He didn't push for more. That restraint felt like respect. Days later, the truth she had been hiding came closer to the surface. It happened during a conversation with another worker who unknowingly touched on the subject of family and children. The familiar pain returned, sharp and sudden. She grew quiet. The rancher noticed the change immediately. Later, he asked gently if something was wrong. Her first instinct was to say no to protect herself, but exhaustion softened her defenses. She told him, slowly and carefully, about her past. About how she had been judged and set aside. About the thing people believed defined her worth. She did not look at him while she spoke. She waited for the moment when his expression would change, when disappointment would settle in. She had lived that moment too many times. But it didn't come. There was a long silence, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his words were simple. He said people often confuse roles with value. He said companionship mattered more to him than expectations. He said he was not looking to fill a space someone else had decided was empty. She felt tears rise, not from sadness but from relief. Someone had heard her truth and stayed. Still, she was cautious. Old wounds do not heal overnight. She reminded herself not to imagine more than what was offered. Yet, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she wasn't being seen as a problem to solve or a tradition to uphold. She was simply a person. Others began to notice the quiet bond forming between them. There were looks, murmurs, unspoken questions. She felt the familiar fear return. Judgment had followed her before, it could follow her again. One evening she considered leaving, packing her bag, starting over somewhere else. It seemed easier than risking her heart. But then she remembered how tired she was of running, how tired she was of believing she did not deserve to stay. The rancher spoke openly one day, not loudly but clearly enough. He said he valued her presence and her work. He made no excuses, no explanations. That quiet certainty gave her strength. She began to let herself hope, not for a perfect future but for a life where she was not constantly shrinking. She laughed more. She slept better. The land felt less like an escape and more like a place she belonged. Yet challenges remained. Doubt still whispered at night. Fear reminded her of past pain. But now there was something stronger than fear: choice. She was choosing to stay, to trust slowly, to believe that her story was not finished. As the season changed and the fields shifted color, she realized something important. Love did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it came quietly, through respect, patience, and seeing someone fully. She did not know where this path would lead. But for the first time in a long while she was walking forward, not away. And that made all the difference. The change did not happen all at once. It came slowly, like the season turning without anyone noticing the exact day it began. The ranch felt different now. People watched more closely. Words were chosen more carefully. Even the air seemed heavier with quiet judgment. She felt it in the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. She saw it in the quick looks shared between workers. No one said anything directly, but she had lived this before. She knew the signs. Once again, her life was becoming a topic for others to measure and discuss. Some people thought she was lucky. Others thought she was taking a place that did not belong to her. A few believed she had plans she did not deserve. None of them truly knew her story, yet many felt confident judging it. The rancher noticed the shift too. He did not ignore it, but he did not react with anger either. He continued his work as usual, calm and steady. His behavior did not change toward her, and that consistency mattered. Still, she felt the pressure building inside her. At night, doubts returned stronger than before. She lay awake listening to the sounds of the ranch, her thoughts racing. What if this ended the same way as before? What if she was once again standing in a place where she was not fully accepted? The pain of past rejection whispered that she should leave before she was pushed out. One morning, she woke with a tight feeling in her chest. She went through her tasks quietly, avoiding eye contact, keeping her head down. The joy she had started to feel faded under the weight of fear. By midday, she had made a decision in her heart. She would leave before things became harder. She began packing her few belongings slowly, carefully, as if moving gently might lessen the hurt. Each item she folded reminded her of how little she owned and how often she had been ready to walk away. Tears fell silently, not because she was weak, but because she was tired. Before she could finish, there was a knock at the door. It was the rancher. He did not speak right away. He noticed the open bag, the folded clothes. His eyes softened with understanding, not surprise. He asked her if she was leaving. She hesitated, then nodded. Words felt heavy in her mouth. She told him she did not want to cause trouble. She said she had lived her life being the reason others felt uncomfortable. She said she was tired of fighting expectations she could never meet. Her voice shook, but she did not look away this time. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he spoke calmly but firmly. He said that running would not protect her from pain. It would only delay it. He told her that people would always talk, always judge, no matter where she went. What mattered was whether she believed she deserved peace. He said something else too, something that stayed with her forever. He said he did not choose her out of pity. He chose her because she was honest, strong, and present. Because she showed up every day without asking for sympathy. Because she treated people with quiet respect. Those things mattered more to him than any expectation others tried to place on her. She cried then, openly, without shame. Not because she was breaking, but because she was being seen. Still, the outside world did not soften overnight. Some workers remained distant. A few made careless comments. One person suggested quietly that she would never truly fit in. Each word felt like a test of her resolve. She had to decide who she was living for. There were moments when old thoughts returned. She wondered if she was selfish for staying, if she was asking too much by wanting a full life. The voice inside her that had learned to shrink tried to rise again. But this time, she answered it differently. She reminded herself of everything she had survived, of the loneliness she had carried without turning bitter, of the way she had rebuilt herself piece by piece. She remembered that she did not owe anyone an explanation for existing. Slowly she began to stand her ground. She spoke when spoken to, but she did not apologize for her presence. She worked with steady confidence. She allowed herself to smile again, even when it felt risky. The rancher supported her quietly, never loudly defending her, but never stepping away. That quiet support changed things more than arguments ever could. People noticed that she did not fall apart, that she did not beg for approval, that she carried herself with dignity. Some softened, some stayed the same. She learned that acceptance was not something she could control. What she could control was her own worth. One afternoon, she received a letter from her family. It spoke of gatherings, of new babies, of life moving on. But at the end, her mother wrote something unexpected. She said she was proud. She said distance had helped her see her daughter not as a loss, but as a woman building her own life. That letter felt like a small healing. As weeks passed, the tension eased. Not because everyone agreed, but because life continued. Work needed to be done. Seasons changed. The ranch did not stop for opinions. One evening, as they watched the sun set, she realized something quietly powerful. She was no longer waiting for permission to belong. She was no longer asking the world to choose her. She had chosen herself. The fear did not disappear completely, but it no longer controlled her steps. She stayed. She lived. She learned that strength was not loud and courage was not dramatic. Sometimes, courage was simply refusing to leave a place where you had finally found peace. And though challenges still waited ahead, she knew this much. She was no longer the girl who walked away believing she was less. She was a woman who stayed, even when staying was hard. The days began to feel steady, no longer fragile like glass that could break at any moment. Morning light came through her window, and instead of fear, she felt purpose. She woke with the quiet understanding that she belonged where she was, not because everyone approved, but because she had chosen to stay. Work on the ranch continued as always. There were fences to mend, animals to care for, meals to prepare, and long walks across the land. But something inside her had changed. She no longer worked to disappear into usefulness. She worked because she wanted to contribute, because her effort mattered. People noticed the change. Not all of them spoke about it, but some did. A few workers began asking her opinion. Others greeted her more warmly. Even those who remained distant no longer felt powerful. Their silence no longer defined her. One afternoon, she was asked to help organize a community event nearby. It was nothing grand, just a gathering to bring people together after a long season of work. At first, she hesitated. Being seen had once frightened her, but she agreed, reminding herself that hiding had never truly protected her. The day of the gathering arrived with clear skies and gentle wind. People came from nearby places, bringing food, laughter, and stories. She moved among them calmly, offering help, sharing small smiles. No one looked at her with pity. No one asked questions she wasn't ready to answer. She was simply part of the moment. The rancher stayed close, not in a way that claimed her, but in a way that supported her presence. When people spoke to him, he spoke of her with respect, never defining her by anything other than who she was. That simple act spoke louder than any declaration. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the air cooled, she found herself sitting quietly, watching the light fade. She thought about the girl she once was, the one who believed her future had been decided for her. She felt tenderness for that version of herself, not shame. She realized then that life had not denied her meaning. It had simply offered her a different path. Weeks later, she returned briefly to her old community. The visit was not planned as a statement. She went to see her parents, to reconnect, to stand in a place that once made her feel small and see how she felt now. The land was familiar, but she was not the same. Some people were surprised to see her. A few looked uncertain, unsure how to greet her. But she met them calmly, without apology or resentment. She spoke kindly, listened when spoken to, and moved with confidence she once lacked. Her parents welcomed her with warmth. Her mother held her longer than before. Her father looked at her with quiet pride. They saw not a loss, but a woman who had survived rejection without losing herself. An elder woman approached her one evening, the same one who had once advised her to accept a limited life. This time, the words were different. She said she had heard about the ranch, about the work she was doing. She said it seemed she had found peace. The girl, now a woman, smiled gently. She did not explain. She did not defend her choices. She simply said she was living well, and that was enough. When she returned to the ranch, she felt lighter. Closure did not come from proving anyone wrong. It came from no longer needing to. Life settled into a rhythm that felt honest. There were ordinary days and difficult ones, moments of joy and moments of quiet sadness. But none of them felt empty. She was not waiting for something to make her whole. She already was. The rancher never rushed her, never made promises to fill silence. Their connection grew through shared days, mutual respect and understanding. He did not try to save her, and she did not ask him to. They walked beside each other, not ahead or behind. One evening, as they stood looking out over the land, he spoke simply. He said he was grateful she had stayed. Not because his life needed fixing, but because her presence added meaning to it. She replied just as simply. She said she was glad she had not run away. There was no dramatic moment, no grand declaration, just truth spoken softly. As time passed, the ranch became more than a workplace. It became home, not because it erased her past, but because it allowed her to carry it without shame. She planted a small garden near her room. She laughed more easily. She slept peacefully. She learned that fulfillment did not come from meeting expectations placed by others. It came from living in alignment with one's own heart. Sometimes she thought about motherhood, not with bitterness but with acceptance. She found other ways to nurture, through care, patience, guidance, and kindness. Love, she learned, was not limited to one form. On quiet nights when the stars filled the sky, she felt gratitude, not for a perfect life, but for a real one. One shaped by pain, yes, but also by courage. She had been rejected once for something she could not change, but she was chosen later for everything she already was. And in the end, that choice, made by another and then by herself, changed everything. She was no longer defined by what she lacked. She was defined by how fully she chose to live.